So here I was, Morgan, writing a book on the importance of place and process of getting people together in small groups, intimate leadership teams, getting together offsite in small groups, using airplanes to get there usually to go to cool places, in the hospitality industry. And that entire COVID just waxed all of that for a period of 18 months. And so for 3 months, over a year ago, for 3 months, I shelved the entire book. I just set it aside. I didn't, through April, May, and June of 2020, I just didn't know what to do. And then it happened. I started hearing from clients and business partners, colleagues, friends, family, how much they missed getting together. And I'm not just talking about Thanksgiving or Christmas or a wedding or even a funeral. I was also thinking about the thousands and thousands of business planning retreats that got just canceled, and all these management teams were trying to get it together virtually. And I found myself facilitating many strategic planning retreats virtually. I have become now skilled at that. It's not the best way, but it's a way, and it was a good facsimile for a while. But I think there's going to be this gigantic yearning now of leadership teams wanting to get back together. The question is, what are they going to talk about? What's their process, and where are they going to do it?
Hey, everybody, and welcome. I am founder, CEO of Paper Raven Books, Morgan Giss-McDonald, and I have with us today the author of a brand new book called Chunk, Unthink Everything You Thought You Knew About Strategic Planning Retreats. Thank you for being here, Mr. Tom Emison.
Well, Morgan, great to see you. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful. This is going to be fun. Thanks.
This is going to be fun. It's going to be fun because we're launching your book and we're super excited about it. And
mind blown over here, just mind blown. This is a work that's been over 30 years in the making, but the last 2 years really focused and intense. So you're right. We're now 5. We're here. We are. We're here. So it's incredible.
It is incredible. I'm personally pretty excited because I have learned a lot right along with your book being published, because it's about strategic planning retreats for business owners. So you and I, since we started talking, I'm like, dang, I need to learn a lot more about strategic planning retreats. And this is kind of the perfect opportunity for any of us who are interested in business strategy, planning events, things like that. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit, Tom, kind of what is this book about and who is this book for?
The book, okay, great. Interestingly, the book started as a memoir. I'm 63. I was thinking, now would be a good time to maybe just capture some of what I've been doing all of these 30 some years. I've now designed, facilitated, documented, and helped to implement over 230 strategic business plans. And I just don't know anyone who's had that focused kind of journey all this time. So it started as a memoir to accomplish that, but then very quickly, I realized during the pandemic, I needed to provide a lot more than historic, my little story. I needed to interweave my story and what it might mean to a leadership team that's trying to reinvent themselves now in the, post-pandemic kind of environment. So it became very quickly more of a comprehensive strategic clarity roadmap manual, like a book for how to really approach strategy differently in this new normal. So that was kind of how I got started on it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And what timing too, that there was such upheaval in business strategy, sort of across industries, across business size, all of that. Suddenly every business is now rethinking what it's here to do, who it serves, how it serves those people. And so maybe could you give us a little bit of a kind of a teaser of what we are going to learn when we crack into your book, Chunk? What are we kind of going to discover?
Let's go to 3 places right now with what people are going to learn. The first is the importance of the process. A lot of people don't really understand the strategic planning process. They think of it as like an event or a retreat or this thing you go to. They're very transactional in what they're thinking of when they think of strategy. And I'm a little bit more relational and process oriented. There's a flow, there's a cadence, there's a process. All the great companies, the great businesses that I reference in Chunk that have great strategic clarity, for them, it's like a discipline. It's a management discipline. So you're going to learn, the reader is going to learn about that discipline. The second thing they're going to learn is about place. Right now, I am at a spectacular northern Minnesota business conference center and resort deep in the middle of the woods. Um, and this is my classic setting, Morgan. This is where I've been. This is the exact type of room in which I've been leading retreats all of these years. And the place that a team goes to really can inspire, or it can sort of run them aground. If it's a dumpy, dreary basement conference room, and we're going to do planning for half a day or something like that, nothing's going to be transformed in that kind of a business. But when you invest in the right kind of place and the right kind of process, that's what the great companies do. This is what Jim Collins, Michael Porter, Peter Drucker, and all these, lately Simon Sinek and a whole bunch of others, it's what they've been saying. So I just am capturing, a lot of other wisdom out there. So place, process, I said. And then the third thing is that it's a creative endeavor. They're going to learn that it's a creative endeavor. Everyone thinks strategy and strategic business planning is mostly a financial exercise or just a brand or marketing exercise. Not in the high-performing companies. They understand that it's very broad and it's very comprehensive. It's all-inclusive. Every aspect of the business is involved, and people do it. Human beings develop strategy. So it's a creative endeavor. The entire process of a retreat needs to be viewed through that creative filter, if you will. It's a creative endeavor. Yeah.
Well, the good news is, so if you guys are watching this with us and you're excited, you're like, oh, I want to know more about this process of strategic planning and retreats and how to do this, you can grab a free copy today. Go to paperravenbooks.com/chunk, and it'll take you right to the page where you can get a free version of the ebook. And of course, you can get the physical and other versions of the book as well. But today you can grab a free copy and dig into it right away. And Tom, I'd love to know, so your book is creative, right? So you actually bring a lot of like different aspects of yourself into the book itself. And you talk a lot about music. You're a big rock and roll fan. How did you weave into the book, but also I assume how you approach business strategy? How did you weave rock and roll and music into that? Where does it show up?
Well, I think there are parallels. I think there are a lot of parallels as how a musical group, a band, a choir, an orchestra, or just AC/DC. I think there is a process that they go through that is a creative process that we all call, you and I call it jamming. Look at those musicians over there; they're jamming on something really great. I think that's like the mentality that you need to have in a great retreat. Is we need to jam on the business now. We need to think creatively about the business. What is our purpose? What is our vision that we have for the business? What are the core values that we hold to be, sacred to us? What is our broad financial plan? Brand recognition. I can just go right through the entire strategic roadmap that I write about in Chunk in the process. But as I did it, I kept thinking, this reminds me of something that I saw Grand Funk Railroad do, or this retreat reminded me of something that is in a song by Elton John, or this is something that reminds me of the Beatles. And accidentally, while I was starting to write some of the chapters to the book, I was opening with thoughts related to rock and roll. They later became the opening of virtually every chapter of the book, is some reference to rock and roll. And it tells you a little bit, who I am, where I'm from, and kind of stuff that I've been listening to. If people can't appreciate Nirvana and Creedence Clearwater Revival and a little bit of the Doors, and I brought some of these.
You brought some.
These are I have aids. I have visual aids here, so I bet you don't even know who's on the cover of this, do you?
Please don't quiz me. I'm a country girl at heart. I said before, you can ask me about Reba McEntire and George Strait.
Here, Pink Floyd, Roger Waters. I saw Roger Waters in concert.
I did a sociology report on Pink Floyd once, so okay, I'm familiar.
The other thing is, I learned years ago, this is kind of a neat musical connection too. In the business consulting world, every consulting firm provides their directors and their managers with a small budget to entertain clients, take a client out to a ball game or, those sorts of things, or suites at a local stadium, that kind of thing. Well, many, many years ago, I fell into a habit of inviting my clients and others, instead of something sort of ordinary, like a football game, how about bringing them to a Roger Waters concert instead and entertain them that way? And so I was mixing strategic planning clients were in the seat right next to me,
Yeah.
in front of Stevie Winwood.
So
You
cool.
know, I mean, so I had a lot of those kind of moments. So you see how I think it's a creative process. Music is obviously a creative endeavor. So is strategy. And so in the book, I offer a bunch of little gems. I hope people like them that are related to music. And I run the gamut,
Yeah.
going all the way back to Stravinsky and all the way up to a band from Washington, D.C. called Rare Essence. So I've tried to keep it interesting that way. So it's not such a dry, I didn't want to write just a dry textbook on strategy.
Yeah, yeah, that you definitely have not written a dry textbook. It's full of stories and examples and illustrations, but also the practical pieces. You know, you do a really amazing job of kind of weaving or marrying all of those elements. So, guys, you can grab a free copy right now, even if you're not going to read it for a few more days. Go and get the copy today so
Yeah.
that you can dive into it. paperravenbooks.com/chunk. I'm curious, Tom, and I didn't prep you for this one either, but I'm wondering about like classic mistakes that maybe business owners make. So I'm thinking about, myself, I'm growing a business, we're very much in a growth phase. And so I'm wondering about like, folks who are, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps ahead of me. And so you get to this point where you're a business owner who has, a decent position in the marketplace, you have clients, you have some amount of process, but maybe they're not doing strategic planning. What kind of mistakes do you see established business owners make when it comes to strategic business planning?
Oh boy. Well, the biggest mistake would be the absence of any planning, right?
Mm,
There are many organizations that simply think strategic planning on a 3 to 5 year horizon, and that's the typical planning horizon for most long range planning. Uh, there are a lot of business owners and leaders who think, well, that's just not possible. And so they've mentally got themselves into a position where any destination will do, any vision will do. And so the business kind of meanders. Often it will meander in the absence of a plan. And that meandering costs money, and it can frustrate employees, and it can disappoint customers. Meandering, not cool. You know what's cool is a focused vision and direction that allows the management team some latitude and some, um, how do I explain it? Sort of the ability to work within a framework, but loosely within that framework. Stay loose, stay agile, but know what the vision is, and know that you have the same vision as the other people in your management team, that you share this common vision. So the biggest failure or concern would be a company that doesn't even do any planning. But the biggest mistake during the planning process is simply an overemphasis on the event. They're focused on the moment in time. So they see something on the planning calendar, hey, 4 months from now, we have a strategic planning meeting with our leadership team in the calendar. We should probably get organized. And they get a little organized. They deliver, half a day of golf, half a day of strategic planning. And they call that a planning retreat.
mm,
Seriously, really?
yeah.
I think leadership teams are better than that, smarter than that. And the really good ones know that it takes like a 2 day retreat, or very often two-day retreats, for the executive team to get away. That depends, of course, on the business. And your business is a smaller business. You probably can't take 4 days completely offline to reimagine the business. But a lot of my clients over the years have been those companies between like 200 and maybe 2,000 employees, 200
Mhm.
employees and 2,000, something like that. And they got limited resources. They do not have the luxury of dabbling with their business. They've got to be very focused, and the plan is what does that, of course. And so that's the other big failure, is the companies that don't plan, or they just think it's an event. They don't think of
Mm,
planning as a process.
yes. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience? Like what types of clients have you worked with? And yeah, how has your own understanding of business strategy and retreats kind of evolved over the years?
I do not come from the business. I didn't take a single finance or business class in college. I'm actually a recovering alcoholic and drug addict from back in the '70s, which probably uh, might help you understand a little bit some of my rock and roll background. Um, you know what I learned in the process. I had the very great fortune at a young age professionally to meet a gentleman who I write about in Chunk, who changed the trajectory. And I just hope everybody has somebody like that in their life, a mentor who just dings them at a very important time in their life, usually in the 20s, where it sets the trajectory. And because I met this gentleman, I was able to start facilitating portions of strategic planning retreats and eventually entire retreats and then entire strategic planning processes. And so by now I forgot your question.
How has it evolved? Yeah, what
Yeah,
kind of
so it
clients do you
evolved.
work with
So it
now?
evolved from there to now, just dozens and dozens of retreats all over the country at some stellar locations. The Garden of the Gods Resort out in Colorado Springs, the Broadmoor also out in Colorado Springs. I had that experience where I was all over these places, and I did this repeatedly within the environment of a big CPA and consulting firm. So technically, my job was as a consultant in a large CPA consulting firm for all of those years. And but my work was out with clients of the firm, helping them with strategic planning. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And it evolved, and eventually I realized it was not going to be a stepping stone to a career. It was the career. I realized that very quickly over 25 years ago, and that's been the focus.
So this is your method that you've kind of
Yeah.
fine-tuned and honed in the trenches, on the ground, with companies year over year over year. This is you kind of writing out basically like what you've created as a framework.
Yeah, I think I offer two perspectives in Chunk that leaders need to recognize very soon right now. The first is that developing your strategy. Well, here I'll just pose it this way. This is like a fictional conversation that
Yep.
is very typical of a conversation I've had with many CEOs. I ask the question, "How you doing on your strategic planning?" And the CEO says, "We're doing just great. We have a great strategic plan." And then I ask, "Great, it sounds fantastic. What's your strategy?" And I get this deer in the headlights kind of look back from
Do
a lot
stuff.
of
We're
even
gonna
top
do stuff.
CEOs. They're like, "Well, what do you mean? What's my strategy?" I said, "Yeah, I did. Your strategic plan sounds great. What's the strategy of the company that is embraced and discussed in your strategic plan?" And I've seen the scales fall from their eyes. I've seen top leaders just kind of realize, wow, I can't even articulate my strategy. I've been through, this whole process. And so
Wow.
what I did in Chunk is I laid out the strategic clarity roadmap that eliminates all of the buzz and the hissing and the noise and the kind of get down to the core ingredients. What's your strategic mentality? What's your big picture vision? What's your core purpose and core values? What are the key initiatives that you're going to implement? And keep all of that very high in the organization, very, very strategic to reposition the business or improve an existing position of the business. But a lot of strategic plans, Morgan, are nothing more than a list of operating improvements that leaders want to make to the company. They call it their strategic plan, and then I read it and like, I don't see much strategic here, and they might recognize that later, which is why I've been coming to locations like this and running more elaborate, in-depth processes to stimulate the mentality of the leadership team to have a genuine strategy.
Yeah. Can you give me an example? And if it's from a previous client, it doesn't have to be, we don't have to name the client, but so we can kind of, fuzzy the details a bit. But like when you've helped someone go from, I want to make operational tweaks to, oh, now we have a strategy. Can you give us a little example or illustration of what that difference might look like for a company?
Well, there's two examples I'll share. One is and I will name a name because they are in a chapter in the book. This particular company is in fact the focus of an entire chapter in Chunk. And the name of that company is GE Johnson Construction Company out in Colorado. And I outline, I think readers want to know just what you asked, Morgan. Business readers want to know, hey, show me an actual example of like how this all came into full blossom. And so I have done that in a chapter in the book with Jim Johnson, the CEO of GE Johnson Construction. But I'll share another one that I will keep anonymous, of a company that, we started out when I first met them. It was through an industry event where I was a speaker. I do a fair amount of public speaking. And so I given some sort of address or a seminar This gentleman came up afterwards, wanted to learn more about my strategic planning capabilities. I got to know them. We started an engagement together. We started working together, and all of the initiatives that were worked on were very like 1 year oriented sort of initiatives. We called it strategic planning, but it was a very short term type of strategic planning. It had a lot of operational sort of aspects to it, very tactical, not a lot of repositioning of the business. And the reason was that about a year later, a distant relative was to come into the business as full owner of that business.
Whoa.
And this isn't a small company. This is a fairly large construction related business, which has been my sandbox for the last 30 some years. Architects, engineers, and contractors and developers. This firm was a large specialty construction company. And so a year later, we pumped up that process and got into genuine 3 year to 5 year strategic planning with more of a 10-year goal or a 10-year long range vision that they had for the business. And that's when they morphed as a leadership team from I need to implement initiatives as in addition to my day job.
Mm.
They morphed into I need to now help implement these initiatives as my day job.
Mm.
This is my new role as a leader, is to manage strategic change and the initiatives. And we talk a lot, but there's a lot of talk out there about how to delegate authority and responsibility. You want to know a cool way to do it? Engage a fairly large team offsite at a great place with a really good process, professionally managed, that produces insights with a big enough team that the top leaders can start to let go of more operational day-to-day stuff and have others rise up. I mean, this is what the great leaders and great companies have been doing. This is what Daniel Pink talks about, when he talks in this book Drive about mastery and autonomy and purpose.
Yep.
It's what a lot of authors have been writing about for many years. And I've just been observing it in the trenches. That's all for 30 years. And I decided to put it in a book.
Yeah. Amazing. And so you guys, if you're listening, you're like, this is the book that I've been missing, and maybe you're still growing a business like I am and kind of in the early stages and wanting to get this into the DNA of the business early. Maybe you are team or part of a leadership team and realizing that your company needs this. You can get a free copy. Check it out right now today, paperravenbooks.com/chunk, CHUNK, chunk. So last question. Well, a couple more questions, Tom. So one, I want to ask about your writing process. So as you are releasing a book, I'm sure you're getting a lot of these questions around, okay, Tom, when you sat down to write the book, what was that actually like for you?
Um, the inspiration for the book was a moment in time that happened to me 2 years ago, where the way I started writing, it just happened at 11:30 one morning, and it was like floodwaters.
Mm.
At first, it was just a mad rush of how should I organize chapters and what would be the purpose? Who would be the audience? Why am I doing this? Do I have a story to tell? Some books that I've read where someone thought they should write a book, I later read the book and I didn't think it was a very good book. So I had great doubts. I've had great, just insecurity is what I wrestle with as a writer with, should I get this down in writing and how do I get it down in writing? So 2 years ago, I had an event that sort of acted as the catalyst. I had a conflict with a client and where we disagreed on something. And I realized a chief strategy officer needs to be independently able to influence, advise, and recommend changes to the business model to a CEO or a president, that kind of role. And I realized I should write about that, like how this is actually accomplished in the real world. So as I started writing, it was just initially this flood. Then COVID. So here I was, Morgan, writing a book on the importance of place and process of getting people together in small groups, intimate leadership teams, getting together offsite in small groups, using airplanes to get there usually to go to cool places, in the hospitality industry. And that entire COVID just waxed all of that for a period of 18 months. And so honestly, for 3 months, over a year ago, for 3 months, I shelved the entire book. I just set it aside. I didn't, through April, May, and June of 2020, I just didn't know what to do. And then it happened. things, I started hearing from clients and business partners, colleagues, friends, family, how much they missed getting together. And I'm not just talking about Thanksgiving or Christmas or a wedding or even a funeral. I was also thinking about the thousands and thousands of business planning retreats that got just canceled,
Yeah.
you know, and all these management teams were trying to get it together virtually. And I found myself facilitating many strategic planning retreats virtually. I have become now skilled at that. It's not the best way, but it's a way, and it was a good facsimile for a while. But I think there's going to be this gigantic yearning now of leadership teams wanting to get back together. And the question is, what are they going to talk about? What's their process? And where are they going to do it? So the later chapters kind of followed that along. And when I was done with the manuscript, I contacted you, among others. You were on a short list of highly recommended advisors to help with this, Paper Raven Books. And you and I talked, and that began a developmental edit process where I got some really good advice from some of your staff on uh, rethinking some sections and maybe reordering some of the sections, which I was not prepared for. It was very mentally draining, for me as a writer at that point, but incredibly good edits that were recommended. And then finally, the final editing process in the last several weeks leading up to today.
Today. Okay, Tom. So now that you know you've been through this whole journey, if you were to go back in time to a younger version of yourself, what do you wish that you had known? Maybe when you started writing, maybe even earlier than that. What do you wish you had known about the process of becoming an author that you didn't know, and that maybe you could tell yourself retrospectively?
I would say to the younger me, I would say, Tom, why were you writing poetry and short stories when you were in sixth grade?
Hmm.
Sixth and seventh and eighth grade is not when most young guys are writing poetry and short stories, but I was. So I would say to that person, you're going to write. Now I've written a lot of articles and business journal articles and white papers, technical white papers. I've done a lot of that kind of writing, but this is my debut book, my first book. So that's what I would say to the younger Tom is, you can write, spill the beans, tell people about something that you know. Well, I guess it wasn't till age 63 that I that I realized I've got something to share, something worth sharing out there. The other thing I would say is be direct. Uh, Mark Twain, I think, once said, um, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time.
Hmm.
So, because editing takes time, it takes more work. So I would say to myself, do that extra work to condense, get it down to what the reader really just needs to know.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for launching this book for me, a business owner, for all of us business owners, those of us who are on executive teams. We want to do big things in the world. We want to have our impact and leave our mark on the world through the work that we do. And your book makes that so much more possible and achievable for us. So guys, get your copy. Chunk, Unthink everything you thought you knew about strategic planning retreats. You can grab your copy today, paperravenbooks.com/chunk. Tom, thank you for being here. Thank you for writing this book for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's humbling to hear all of that, Morgan. You've been a great partner. Thank you.
You are so welcome. All right, guys, we will see you next time. Okay, bye.